Welcome to the Pod Bay Door.
Hello out there in the verse. This is the Pod Bay Door. Please join us every Tuesday for informed discussions on new and upcoming movies, games, and tech. And if you love Las Vegas, stay tuned because as Vegas insiders, we can give you a unique perspective on its history, provide insider information, and reveal the unknown secrets of our town, Vegas. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. We're glad you're with us. And hey, if you get the chance, subscribe to us and give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Also check in with us on our YouTube channel at the Pod Bay Door Podcast. Pod Bay Door bonus episode. Stay tuned for part 2 of our interview with Chris from Faces and Aces podcast. Now, Chris also, his claim to fame is not being a Vegas visitor. His claim to fame is being a Vegas visitor and then being able to talk about it on his podcast. And you've been a podcaster for how long?
A little about 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And you and all the time you were living in LA, right?
Yeah.
This whole time. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was it always a Vegas themed podcast?
It always was. Originally started with two friends of mine, Katie and Aaron,
Yes.
and we all enjoyed Vegas together. They are much younger,
Yeah.
and so it was kind of different perspectives about the city.
Okay.
At a certain point, Katie and Aaron just kind of, and they're married,
Yes.
and they just kind of didn't necessarily have the passion for podcasting that I did. And so
Because they're married, all the passion's gone. And I heard them now. They are the individuals I heard. I listened to one of your segments, and they were talking about the marathon at Disneyland. It was hysterical because if you didn't know they were married, you knew it right then.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Bickering.
That's right. Good television, Chris.
Yeah, Aaron's a good guy. Katie's a good person, and I like them, and we still hang out.
Right.
But yeah, I just decided to move the show on, continue the show, and tried to find some kind of format. And for roughly about half a year, we've played with different ideas until we finally settled on an idea that seemed to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now your format is interview based, basically. I mean, you seek out Vegas individuals like myself, or cab drivers, or dancers, and things like that.
Yeah.
Will you reinstitute a co-host or someone that's constant?
Ideally, I would find a new host for the show.
Oh, and administrate?
Yeah, I love producing the show.
Yes.
I love producing and doing the sound editing and all of that type of stuff. I'm only the host by default because I want this to be there, but I don't know anyone who loves Vegas as much as I do who can talk about those topics.
Right.
And the show is interview-based, but I would also say it's kind of topic-based, where it starts with a Vegas story.
Yes.
Someone will have a fun Vegas story, and whatever the topic of that story is, I will try to find someone in Vegas to elaborate on or share their experience about it. So, for example, if I had someone come on and tell a funny story about riding in a cab, I'll come to Vegas and talk to a cab driver.
Right. Okay, wonderful. I've listened to the podcast, and as I've been honest with Chris, I don't have a lot of time to listen to podcasts at 1.5, or 2 times speed at all. So I do listen to Chris's podcast. Very enjoyable.
I appreciate that.
Very enjoyable.
Thank
you. You tend to get what people don't realize is the everyday Las Vegan, and you humanize them. They're not a slot machine. I mean, they're people that drive a cab. They're people that dance on a pole, and so on and so forth. So I enjoy that because there is a realness and a grittiness to Las Vegas that I think people can enjoy from afar. They don't want to see it when they're here.
Yeah.
But no, it's fantastic.
I mean, it's a lot like Disneyland. When you go there and the people working there are playing characters there for your enjoyment, and it's very easy to lose sight of that these are people who have homes and lives and other interests.
Right.
And I think people come here when you expand that to a huge thing like Las Vegas.
Sure.
The people working are there for to make sure that you have a good time.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will take that for granted and forget that these are people living and working in the city. And so one of the goals of the podcast is to peel that back and let people know that these are real living, breathing, bleeding people. Yeah. And we want them to come here and enjoy the city, but also be respectful in the city. I've heard so many stories about, well, yeah, all these people come here and they leave the mess behind, and
they leave their humanity at McCarran. It's terrible.
Yeah,
it's terrible sometimes. Not all, but I've seen some things.
Yeah.
Now, podcasting growth. 2.5 years, you've seen a major change in podcasting as far as the world of podcasting.
Sure.
Do you think it's growing at a healthy speed?
I think it is, although I've heard recently that it's slowing down a little bit. I think I looked it up, and it said iTunes says it has about 300,000 podcasts in its roster at this point. 11% growth over last year. I think it's growing. I think it'll continue to grow, but maybe at a slightly slower speed.
Now, do you think the majority of podcasts are just hobbyists? Or do you think that's changing now? Because we're in the corporate eye now. Podcasting, the revenue is there clearly. Joe Rogan's and Adam Carolla's, the major players. But do you think that podcasting is still that sort of grassroots hobbyist?
I think a majority of podcasters are hobbyists. If you look at the 300,000 people who are doing it, I'd probably say 95% are hobbyists. Right. However, the 5% of the people who either have corporate backing or some sort of come to it with already a certain amount of fame, I think they're the ones who are gobbling up most of the revenue.
True.
Yeah.
True. Now, you had brought up something to me, and I found it very interesting. I did some research on it, and I still find it interesting. I find it more interesting now.
Yeah.
Is podcast networks. Now, of course, we will leave the NPRs aside. I mean, if you look at iTunes, of course, they're new and noteworthy is 50% NPR based, but that's what we mean by networks. Are you still have a positive outlook on network formation and putting together a ring of podcasts for mutual benefit?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I have a very positive attitude about it. I think the reasons for doing it, there are a number of reasons for doing it. Sometimes you want to group together with a bunch of your friends who are also doing podcasts and create a network together. Right. Sometimes it's for the benefit of revenue to increase the audience size, and you could pitch the network as opposed to an individual podcast to an advertiser. So there's a bunch of reasons for doing it, but I think I don't really see any downsides to it.
Now, do you think Las Vegas themed, I'm not going to say based, because we've had this discussion. There's a lot of podcasters out there, including yourself, although, again, you're an honorable a visitor.
We try to be.
Yes. But there's a lot of podcasters that don't live here. However, Vegas-themed network, do you think that's even possible?
Oh, it's definitely viable. Yeah.
You think so?
For sure. I mean, the great thing about podcasting is if you imagine it, you can do it. And so if it's a matter of you and I sitting here on mic right now saying, hey, let's make a network, and you agree to it, done. Okay, a network has been created. Now we just need a domain name.
Yes.
So it's that simple.
Yeah. Now, network. Now, when I say network, and when I say most of the things regarding podcasts, I'm talking. My eye is to revenue. So I'm not a hobbyist. My eye is to a shared beneficial revenue to the network. And so, do you think that's possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even with pulling now, my podcast is approaching a year. You're 2.5 years. There are individuals that have been much longer, obviously, that are already out there revenue based.
Yeah.
And do you think they would be interested? They would be interested. Would they be jump on board, or would they?
Podcast revenue based?
Yeah, networks.
Specifically Vegas podcasts?
Yeah.
I think they would be less inclined to join because they've already created their own bubble, and so they're already making money. And so for them, joining a network would mean sharing what they've spent hard time building.
Yeah.
And I respect that because it's a business. So why would they?
Even though the other podcasts though could bring them untapped markets, untapped regions. See, I think they'd be cutting their nose off to spite their face.
Not necessarily, because a lot of the podcasts that have been around for 5, 6, 7 years, the Vegas podcasts, they have built it. And if anything, podcasts like ours are leeching from their audience.
Okay.
I think they were let's stop mincing words. Specifically, I'm thinking 500 by Midnight. They're the ones who have been around the longest outside of Vegas.
Right.
Doing the Vegas thing.
Yes.
And so they've built a very loyal fan base, and they're monetizing their podcast. They're doing things to continue to monetize it.
Yes.
So it's totally understandable if they would just rather continue doing their own thing.
Right.
as opposed to say, hey, we're a bunch of friends, let's just get together and make a podcast network together.
Right. Now, as it regards quality of podcast, we've had a brief discussion about this as well. Do you think listeners are going to demand more of a journalistic nature to them, accuracy, specifically? You know, do you or are listeners not that discerning? They're wanting to be entertained. They don't care if the numbers are right.
I guess it really depends on what accurate about what specifically.
When I say journalistic standards, I mean, you know, God, Fox News aside, and all the other news aside, what I mean is that there's a code of conduct and an effort to be accurate. If you're not accurate, you know, I'm the first to admit that, you know, fact check me, fine, I'll say it on air.
Right.
But what I mean is that I don't like the movement of citizen journalism. Joe Rogan recently said that, why not? The news sucks so bad, why not? Well, why not is very simply because there's no basis for oversight. They're just going to say whatever they say, you know? And the people like the Hollywood stuff right now and the senator that supposedly molested people. Well, it's alleged.
Right.
And they've already crucified him on Twitter. It's done. He can never take that back. The bell can't be unrung. That's what I mean. You know, and I understand a lot of podcasts are just two dudes talking.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You know, that's fine. Talk about movies and talk about stuff. But I think you strive for something a little bit more in depth. You want to, you know, and so do you think the quality that your podcast offers should be the standard?
I think in terms of from the podcaster side, I think people should do what they're comfortable with. And I think from the listener side, I think they're well aware going in. I think they're savvy enough to know, you know, so-and-so did the research or so-and-so is just kind of riffing. I think they're savvy enough to know. And, you know, when it comes to Vegas news, let's be frank about it. It's not, you know, the type of stuff where it's, can I pay my bills and that type of stuff. So it can go in one ear, out the other, and, you know. So it's not necessarily critical to, is Kendra Wilkinson in love letters or is she in sex tips? Which one is she? Like, it really, at the end of the day, that kind of stuff really doesn't matter.
Sure. Now, do you enjoy the fact that there's substance to your podcast? I mean, do you make an effort to have substance rather than just being the Kendra Wilkinson surface? You know, who kissed who and who's transgender now and all the crap. I mean, the clickbait.
Yeah,
it's audio clickbait.
Right. I
mean, do you strive to be beyond that?
I do, yeah, definitely. There's an effort, and it starts with fun. That's the kind of where I hope to build each episode, with a fun story, and then wherever that takes me, because I do have a certain format for the show, but I stray from it often just because, you know, leaf on the wind type of thing. It's taking me in this direction, so we're going to go this way. Right. But I think I do make an effort to not only have a little bit of substance, but also to be different than the other shows that are out there, you know, and that's kind of out of reverence to them. I do my best to, you know, stay in my lane. You know, if someone else is doing something, I'll try to avoid it. I have so much respect for the other podcasters who came before me and after me. I want, you know, there's so much opportunity out there for everybody. And so, you know.
Now that staying in your lane brings up the last question regarding podcasts. How then, if you stay in your lane, and with the coming sort of inevitable market competition, you know, obviously if you can make money, you're going to make money. You know, you're not going to turn it away. Assuming that, how do you poke your head up, you know, from the water and say, hey, I'm here? You know, how do you compete with the celebrities A, B, and C level that are having podcasts now?
Sure.
Forget Joe and forget Adam and forget the giants.
Right.
You know, we're not going to match them right now.
Right.
But like Anna Faris, for example. Okay, actress. You know, she and Chris Pratt are together, so she has a great reference, and now she has a podcast.
Right.
How do you, staying in your lane, pop your head up?
Essentially, you're saying, how do I market this podcast to a wider audience? And I don't know if that's possible.
Okay.
because it's a very specific topic. Not everyone loves Vegas.
True.
For example, I followed a podcast briefly called My Brony Pony, where some guy had a brother who was a brony way into My Little Pony.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
And that was a very targeted audience
Wow.
for that podcast. I just found it very amusing. He only had like 6 episodes and then he was done, but it was just really funny.
So an adult interested in My Little Pony?
Oh, that you didn't know that's a thing?
No, I
Oh,
know
that's a
about
huge thing.
furries, you know, where
Yeah. Yeah, guys, adult
Costumes.
men into My Little Pony, they're called bronies.
Wow. God, Chris, LA is still strange, isn't it?
That's nationwide, baby.
Kidding.
But
But I understand it.
so I don't know how big a Vegas podcast can get in terms of national attention.
Now, that being said,
Mm-hmm.
if you see, obviously you're quite capable of having discussions above and beyond Vegas
Mm-hmm.
and intellectual discussions. Do you see yourself branching out and making, like my podcast, for example, we talk about Vegas because it's wonderful. But we also talk about other things, you know, because we're involved in so many other different things, the tech industry and the production. Do you see yourself branching out, or are you happy where you are?
I'm happy where I am because I feel like I do branch out, not huge branches, but little branches in each episode.
Yeah, okay.
For example, I had Cara Fortier from the Playgrounding podcast on recently. She told a cab story, but her podcast is about how play enhances the lives of adults. It has mental health benefits, and physical health benefits, getting out there and actually playing and having a good time.
Right.
And so for the people who listened to that, it was probably maybe a 3-4 minute segment that we covered about her show. I hope that people will kind of hear that and then maybe move on to her podcast, which is wonderful. And not that I'm plugging her show, but more so the concept of getting out there, playing, having a good time is good for you, which is part of the reason why I come to Vegas.
Sure.
But yeah, so I do take small tangents, and each episode I think had, another one was Kayla Drescher about magician, and we had a small discussion about women in magic and how she actually came forward and says she's been, she's afraid to go to the magic castle alone because of sexual harassment. Some of the men magicians, and this happened way before everything broke with what's his name.
Yeah.
But but yeah,
Weinstein, Spacey. It's everybody now. It's Charlie Sheen. I mean, just name one, they're all in trouble.
Yeah.
CK.
Yeah. So basically, I do try to add little nuggets of information that non-Vegas, and I try to hit on it, move past it quickly, so maybe no one will notice.
Yeah. Now, keeping in mind, you're as I am, you're fully employed. I mean, it's I applaud you for one simple reason, is that my business has to do with production. Yours doesn't necessarily. It sort of does. You're in entertainment industry, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work. That's why you don't. That's why you want to be the producer instead, and get a. Are you looking for talent now?
I'm not necessarily actively looking for talent, but if I happen to see someone or someone approaches me, we'll have a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming on. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And obviously, when do you go back? You're going back
tonight.
Going back tonight?
Came in this morning. I leave tonight. Yeah.
You're just.
I'm doing the 12-hour turnaround.
Wow. Now, you came here for obviously to be on the podcast, but why did you come originally?
Oh, because when I was here 2 weeks ago, I accidentally left some recording equipment in the hotel safe.
Oh my God!
And so it's currently sitting in the lost and found, and I don't trust them.
They found it.
Yes, they found it. I have an ID number.
Excellent.
I don't trust them enough to mail it to me.
No.
Because of the ridiculousness of tracking it down.
Yes.
I found them to be somewhat incompetent.
Yeah, and the stuffing wouldn't be probably to your liking.
Therefore, to get my stuff back, I thought the safest way to do that, and it's not crazy. It's maybe $200-300 worth of equipment, but still, any excuse to get to Vegas.
Absolutely. There you go. There you go. But Chris, thank you for being here. And now it's shameless plug time.
Oh, okay.
Everything you want to say, I'm going to say it first. This is Chris from Faces and Aces podcast. And now you're going to hear Chris tell me everything there is to know about it. .coms, social, speeding ticket numbers, Whatever you want. Hit it, Chris.
Okay, well, make sure to use stamps.com and use the promo code Mark Maron.
There you go.
Because that guy needs more money.
That's right.
Well, I do a podcast, as we've talked about, called Faces and Aces Las Vegas. You could find it at facesandaceslv.com, and you could find me on Twitter at facesandaceslv. And I like interacting with people, so hit me up on Twitter.
Fantastic. Well, everything Chris and I talked about, check out the Pod Bay Doors enhanced blog companion, and you'll get, I'll put all the links there. But Chris, thank you very much, and we're out. Thanks to everyone listening and watching. You can catch the Pod Bay Door on the Podbean app or any of your favorite podcast apps, including iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, and Stitcher Radio. You can watch the show on our YouTube channel at the Pod Bay Door Podcast. Please download, like, and subscribe. Our social connectivity screen is coming up. Check in with us on Facebook, Twitter, and WordPress. The Pod Bay Door is closed and talent is out. Hey everybody, thank you very much for tuning into the show. We would love to hear your show suggestions and comments. If you are watching on our YouTube channel, please click to subscribe. You can also connect with us on Facebook using @PBD Podcast, on Twitter using @TPBD Podcast, and on WordPress at thepodbaydoor.wordpress.com.